Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the Haydn Symphony Crusade. Yes, and now we're up to number 43, the Mercury Symphony. Now, some of you who've been following this mentioned the fact that it's been slowing down somewhat, and it has. And I apologize for that, but I just want to explain to you what's going on. I have permission from Naxos to use their entire Haydn Symphony cycle, as samples. And some other labels will come in too, probably later on. But they've been very, very kind, and it's been very helpful. However, YouTube's insane copyright protection algorithm has been flinging copyright claims at me for these videos. Some of them videos I've already made a long time ago, but most of them, now that we're into the middle period symphonies that enjoy multiple recordings, the algorithm is getting confused and it's mixed up and it doesn't know which recording is which because it's all the same music. It's not that sophisticated. And not only do I get copyright claims because of using, from the person who thinks they own the recording they think I'm using, but isn't, I get them from all of the rights organizations and music publishers worldwide. I could get 4 or 5 copyright claims for one excerpt in one of these middle period symphonies. And then I have to clear them, which usually takes at least 30 days, assuming they don't contest my disputing their claim, which some of them very stupidly have. And then I have to have a whole nother process to fight that. And if I don't win, I get what's called a copyright strike against my channel, and 3 strikes and my channel disappears. It's a horrible system. And so I'm being very cautious moving forward. I want to make sure that before I start doing new videos with lots of musical samples, that I'm clearing the existing copyright claims or getting there anyway, because I don't want to have problems. And I've written to YouTube and I write to these people. First of all, when someone gives you a copyright claim, I know this is boring to you, but I really do want you to understand, you have no way of contacting them. You can only dispute the claim, but they don't provide direct contact information or anything else. Because I would call them up and say, look, I'm doing this series. I have the right to do this. Leave me alone. But they don't care. And they don't do it. They won't do it. They don't want you to be able to reach them. They just want to be able to suck whatever income that you're getting. And it's wonderfully funny because when you think about it, what am I going to make from one of these videos? 9 cents over 10 years, and it gets split 20 different ways between all the various copyright claimants. I mean, the absurdity of it is just unbelievable. But there's no mechanism to deal with it other than the rather primitive and inconvenient resources that YouTube offers. So I am trying to do these in such a way that I can keep doing them and there won't be too many issues. So we'll see what happens with the Mercury Symphony. The last one, number 42, got 1, 2, 3, 4 copyright claims, I think, and they change regularly. And the Brazilians are the worst. I'm sorry, but the Brazilian Copyright Agency thinks it owns everything in the world. And, the Brazilian version of ASCAP, the rights management organization. And they just nail everybody. And it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. I mean, YouTube should not allow these people to do this stuff. There should be the same issue with them as there is with me. If they get 3 inappropriate or wrong copyright claims, they should lose their privilege to enforce their copyright claims. I mean, that's only fair, right? But no, it doesn't work that way. So let's talk about Haydn Symphony number 43. Now, this one has a subtitle. The subtitle is Mercury. I have no idea where that name came from, and it really doesn't apply to the music at all. The music is a very elegant symphony. It's scored for the normal forces of the time. That is a couple of oboes, a couple of horns, and strings. It's really a lovely, elegant, charming symphony. But like everything with Haydn, even though it may be very, very elegant and very cultured, you might say, in this case, it's not rough and tumble. It's not really rural or folky. It's just a beautifully shaped, perfectly proportioned work. And, classical period is supposed to specialize in those things. We always talk about how Haydn's irregular and, quirky and all that. And this piece has its quirks, but the quirks are integrated into the onward flow. Now, the first movement of the Mercury is in 3/4 time, and Haydn really liked 3/4 time for opening movements. You know, the textbooks say you're supposed to have an opening in 4/4, sort of in quick march rhythm. But Haydn liked triple time openings, and the reason, of course, is because 3/4 time is a dance rhythm. The waltz, 1 2 3, 1 2 3, 1, like that. You don't have to make it waltz-like. What you can do, and what Haydn was a master of, is somehow absorbing the energy that this triple time rhythm gives you, because it does give you great energy, because you've got a big stress on the first beat, and it moves forward. It pushes forward. And Haydn wanted the energy in his first movements. And this is a wonderful movement to illustrate how he does that. And Haydn's habit of doing opening movements in triple time was picked up by Beethoven. The opening of the Heroica is in 3/4. No one would call the opening of the Heroica a waltz. But the fact that it's in triple time is what gives the music some of that irrepressible energy. And Beethoven learned this, I think, from Haydn. In any case, this is one of those symphonies. And it begins with a melody that is it's almost genteel. But, with Haydn, nothing is quite what it seems, because it has its genteel melody with loud sort of crashes between each phrase, which means it's extremely recognizable. First of all, it's biam bum bum ba da 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 da. Biam bum bum ba da 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 da. He's trying to give you some sense of how much power the music's going to have, but it's so gentle, and it's in this light waltz tempo. It just floats over the bar lines. It's just lovely. But then, oh my goodness, you see, I mentioned when I talked about sonata forms that there are really two kinds of music in a sonata form movement like this. You have the melodies that define your key areas, and then you have motion music, the music between those key areas that gets you from one to the other. Well, this is a movement that is really, really going to tell you exactly what I'm talking about, because the key areas, the melodies in the key areas are so gentle, almost static. There's just that quiet quarter time, 3/4 time pulsation behind them. And then all of a sudden, off it goes like a rocket. Maybe that's the Mercury part. I have no idea. But the music just takes off like a shot. And all of the music in this movement, or most of it, is based on that opening idea. It's a monothematic sonata form movement. But as with all of Haydn's, monothematic movements, it's actually very expansive. I mean, the Exposition is double the length of the Exposition that is the first section in his earlier symphonies. It has lots of material, but all of that material is spontaneously generated from that very, very interesting opening idea. And you can listen to it a million times and figure out how Haydn detaches bits of it and makes new melodies from old ones and all. It's really wonderful to listen to. But the result is just this organic feeling of becoming, of constantly becoming. So I want to play you the Exposition, and then we'll talk about the development. The other thing I want you to keep in mind, we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's just listen to the Exposition, and listen to the contrast between those static moments, which is where technically the subjects, the main themes exist, and the motion music, which is going to go places with them. It's fascinating. Naxos for letting me use that. We'll see if that's a copyright claim. One of the things that I think is just so worth mentioning and important, and you really should notice in this kind of music, is just how intensely Haydn is trying to work with a limited amount of material to make it sound like a lot of material. There's a lot of stuff in this exposition. It has a lot of variety of movement, variety of tempo, variety of dynamics. It's constantly varied, but thematically, melodically, it's all based on a couple of simple ideas. And that's what gives the music that amazing cohesiveness. And it's just an amazing thing. Now, I'm going to now play the rest of the movement, the development leading to the recapitulation. And we're going to go back a little bit so you can hear the entry into the development. One of the marvelous things about these middle symphonies is that Haydn is starting to work on his transitions. That is, you may recall, the original sort of sonata movement has two halves, both repeated, and that happens here. But those halves don't have to have firm endings. Haydn's, earlier symphonies, the first half comes to a big ending, and then it goes on, and there's a pause. You know that the first half is here, and here's the second half, and then it ends, and then it goes back to the second half. Now Haydn is trying to knit the whole movement together. You still know where the halves fall, but he's writing music that you're not sure. Is it going to go back? Is it going to go forward? What's going to happen? He's creating a greater feeling of inevitability and integration, and the repeats matter. And we'll see that in a minute, very tellingly. But I want you to listen now to the development section. One of the cool things about this particular symphony is that the opening melody, that opening tune, that very gentle waltz-like theme, with the loud pump at the beginning of it, it's not terribly energetic, is it? So the development section it's really going to develop something. It's based almost entirely on the motion music. And what we're hearing in this symphony is a wonderful new concept, which is that the actual thing that gets developed, the most important thematic material, the source of the drama in the movement, doesn't have to be the main theme at all. It can be the transitional material. It can be anything that comes up anywhere. And because all of it's based on the opening idea anyway, it's a constantly developing thing. But the development section proper itself is going to spend most of its time dealing with the motion music. That's where all the stuff is going on. And Haydn wants it to be exciting. So he's going to fake us out. I talked about this before in the last symphony too, the idea of the fake reprise, the fake recapitulation, where he brings back the opening idea only to go somewhere else, to trick us out, to thinking, it's repeating itself, but it's really not. He does that here, right at the beginning of the development section. So listen to the end of the exposition, then the beginning of the development, and you can see how it continues on from the end of the exposition. It's not such a clear-cut stop. And then it looks like Haydn's going to start again, but only for a second. Then we're off to the races. And then when he comes to the recapitulation, to the moment where we're really going back, it takes him 3 times to get there. He keeps restarting. He uses that opening idea, and he does it once in one key, and it's like, that's not it. He does it again in another key. Well, that's not really there. And then finally, whoomp, dum, bum, ba, da, 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 it's back. It's back, but of course, because it's Haydn, it continued. The music just continues developing, basically, right up until the end, in modified form of what we've heard before. It's a brilliantly elegant movement, full of energy on the one hand, and charm on the other. Really a lovely, lovely piece. So here is the end of the exposition, leading in to the development, and then the recapitulation of the rest of the movement for your delectation. Here we go. Take it away. you can hear, I hope, in this music that we are now really at the mature Haydn. I mean, Haydn was mature when he wrote his first symphony. He was nearly 30. But his symphonic style has really arrived at something when you get to these pieces. He's so confident in the way he handles the material. The music has that feeling of organic cohesion and inevitability. You use these words, but they don't really mean anything unless you hear it. And I hope that you do. Now, the second movement is a typical Andante, one of those, not too fast, not too slow kind of movements in a moderate walking tempo. The fun thing about this movement for me, it uses the woodwind section, and you'll notice that the harpsichord has gone away. Thank God. At least I think it has. I have to remember what these samples sound like. But yeah, we're in the middle symphonies, and so we don't need that nasty continuo anymore, and it's not used here. But the really cool thing about it is that it's based on the same rhythm as the opening of Beethoven's Fifth. That bum, 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 bum. You know that? Da, 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 da. Yeah. Not the tune, but the rhythm. And actually, the tune, too, in a couple of places, it does things exactly like what Beethoven does. Like, remember when Beethoven has da 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 da. Well, slow that down. It shows up in this movement. Something very similar, a chain of little sequences of that motto. Because that little tag, that 4-movement tag, was part of the general speech of the classical period. It was a topic, a topos, they say in Greek. It was one of those figures or motives that everybody was using. Haydn used it tons and tons of times. Beethoven used it just as much in his 4th piano concerto. Dum bum bum ba 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 da 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 da. Right? It's the same thing. So, Beethoven used it, Haydn used it, everybody used it. What matters is what they made of it. And when you listen to the music of the classical period, you begin to hear that there are certain similarities, certain topics, certain conventions of the language of music, which are shared. And what matters, of course, is not how original they are. What matters is what you do with them. So here's a lovely little slow movement that uses that motto. Listen carefully. I'm just playing you the exposition of it. It's great fun. And listen also to how Haydn reserves the woodwinds to the very, very end of the exposition to bring them in to justify, first of all, a repetition, which means expansion. The movement gets bigger, and also a beautiful wash of color. He's beginning to use the orchestra for itself. In other words, this is not like piano music orchestrated, or it's not some sort of music on paper. It's actual music that justifies itself through its own timbre and sound as it progresses. So here's the exposition of the slow movement with the 4-note Beethovenish motto. Lovely, isn't it? Now, the minuet. The minuet we're not going to play samples of in this particular case because I really need to go on to the finale, which is fascinating. The minuet is a lovely little movement with a wonderful middle section. You know, Haydn's trio sections are always cool and harmonically interesting, and this one is no exception. The minuet begins very, very rigidly in 8-bar time, and then somewhat in the second part, we have Haydn's usual rhythmic hijinks, which expand the phrasing in unpredictable ways. But it's short. It's like less than 3 minutes. It's a short little movement, or 3 minutes long, and it's you can listen to it yourself. We don't need to talk about it more than that. But the finale, now things get interesting, because this finale is over 5.5 minutes long, and we're going to hear the whole movement, including repeats, and it really balances the first movement. This is a big symphony, by the way, for all of its, chamber-like qualities. If you played it with all the repeats, it would last a good half an hour, which is as long as symphonies normally are, in any period, by anybody. I mean, there are the big romantic crazy ones and other things, but basically, we're at the fully grown classical symphony now, and this finale is the first Haydn finale, I think, that actually has a coda. In other words, you have two halves both repeated, but at the end of the second half repeat, there's an ending. He writes an actual ending. Normally, or up till this point, when we hear these finales, the ending of the second half is the same both times. You just play the second half twice. So it's bum bum, and it's over. And that ending is not terribly final. Haydn is trying to increase the importance of the finale to counterbalance the first movement. And he does it in just the most wonderful way by writing an actual coda. And you remember the last finale we heard, it was a theme and variations movement, a quick theme and variations movement. He's working on his finales. He's trying to preserve their sense of lightness and energy while increasing their importance as the ending of the entire symphony. And in this finale, he makes great strides in that direction. And the ending is not just the usual two notes, bum. It's not. It's bum, bum, like the ending of the Heroica again. He's finding these formulas, these classical formulas that tell us, we have reached the end. And it's special because it's really the end. So I need to play you the entire finale. You're going to hear the first movement exposition and the second half, both halves repeated, because the repeats are not optional. You must play both of them in order to get the effect of having the coda at the end. And I'll make a little superscription there that tells you where the coda actually starts, just so that you can, get a sense of it. But it's really, really cool because things are happening in these symphonies. The symphonic concept is developing with each new entry that Haydn makes. He's thinking. We hear how his mind is working. And that's, of course, what makes this crusade so incredibly fascinating. I mean, to hear the evolution of the language of music in the hands of a genius. And he's so kind and ingratiating to us in the way he lets us hear that. It's just a miracle. Miracle. So here's the entire finale of the Mercury, Symphony No. 43, with its marvelous little coda telling us that, this finale matters. So stick that in your pipe and smoke it. I really hope you enjoyed that. I mean, I remember the first time I heard this, and I was thinking, you get into a habit, right? It's a finale, two halves, both repeated. That's how it's going to end. But then it doesn't. And the whole universe of musical thought opens up, a new realm of possibilities. And those possibilities Haydn is going to explore pretty interestingly as this crusade continues and as he continues. And if, God willing, I don't get slammed by copyright claims, we continue. We'll be fine. I mean, it's going to be okay. It just may take a little longer. And that's all right. Savor each work as it comes. So keep on listening, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.